Hey Monzur, I wanted to show you 3 different tricks that I'm using on Photoshop that help with the Instagram pictures that may help you when you're making the future ones. So I'm going to switch over to share screen and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, first one is to stretch the background color or image. So this is the one we did with Mel Robbins. If you look at, let's see, if I go to Google, sorry, this is the original picture that I think I took. There might be a higher resolution one. Anyway, let's take this picture, bring it back into Photoshop. I love Photoshop. It's not the picture, but it's the same. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is a lower quality file, but it doesn't really make a difference. You can see if I make it the same size, that's about the same size. Obviously, it's blurry because it's not the same picture, but what you can see here is that there's not enough space above her face here to be able to make that picture work. And so what I do is I cut the layer. So I take this tool here, I highlight over just the space that is going to be cut off, that has nothing on it, cut it, edit, cut, and then I'll click away, go edit, paste, and we have just this part here. I line it up exactly, and then I do show transform controls, and then move it up. And that's how you can extend it. Now you can see it's a little extra blurry here. So when you do this, when you stretch a picture, you want to make sure that it's still visible, that it doesn't look bad when you stretch that background. But it's what I've done on a lot of different pictures is be able to stretch the top or stretch the side or stretch both so that we can then fit text above it. So if you look at copy, this is the original. If you look on the layers here, you can share my screen sharing. Yes. If you look at the layers here, you can see that this is one layer and then this is another layer. So I took that little tiny picture and stretched it so that it took up the top. It gave me the space to then do follow your heart up top. So that's really a handy trick when you have a solid color or solid background, even some kind of gradient, just make sure when you stretch it that it still looks okay as a final result. So that's tip number 1, super helpful because a lot of times we don't have enough space above the header to the side. Tip number 2 is going to be with what am I going to do here? Tip number 2 is going to be around the fade. And so let me take another Mel Robbins picture to show you an example. Sometimes we want to really make a picture work for whatever reason. So let's say we wanted to use this. This already has some nice space above the top. Oh, it's really low res. Let's pick something bigger. Let's say we really wanted to use this. Still low res, but it's fine. Actually, let's go with this one. That's a good one. Okay, so say we wanted to use this one. Now we wouldn't because her facial expression isn't great, but whatever. Let's say we wanted to use this picture. Bring it into Mel here. Okay. Up. So, we do a little bit of stretching so that it matches. Okay, so say we're doing this, right? And we're going to move the text over, make it fit on the left side, something like that. And we're going to make it white. Okay, perfect. Now, this is not a great picture. Obviously, one, because her facial expression is not great, but also it's a little hard to read the text because the stuff in the background. So what I like to do here is I want to create a new layer that's going to be below the text but above the picture. So click on the picture, I go layer, new layer. And then you have this, make sure one is black and one is white on your color selection. Take the paint, whatever this is, paint bucket, and go switch it to gradient. And then what I do is I create a gradient line, something like this. And what it's going to do is wherever you start, that's where the black is going to start. And wherever you end is where the white's going to start. And everywhere in between is going to be a big gradient. So if I want a large gradient, I'll do the whole thing. If I want just a tiny gradient, I'll just do a little bit like that. Right. And if I want it to be black for a good chunk, I'll start it here so that everything above here is black and everything under is white. So now for this picture, I want to cut off about this sides. So I'm going to go something like this. So this is white and this is black. Then I'm gonna go to the layer here and just cycle through these until I get to one that I like. So it'll be something like this. Multiply looks good. Color burn a little too much. Multiply or linear burn. This cuts off her hand a little bit. Multiply is okay. Maybe I'll even make it a little bit bigger. So like I'll start here and great fade out. So something like that. It makes it a lot easier to read than this. So if we ever have to, like if we're struggling for pictures and we really need to just fade out the background somehow, then you can do it like that to make it easier to read. It's not ideal, but it gives a helpful situation sometimes where we really want to use a certain picture. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is using glow behind the text. So sometimes we want to fade out the background a little bit just behind the text to make it a little bit easier to read. So what you can do here is on the text itself here, you can right click it, go blending option. Since this is black on white, sorry, white on black or white on gray. If we wanted to make it stand up more, we can make it black. So I would go usually where those outer glow. I would switch it to black, and then I would just play around with. Let's see, we could do normal, and then I would just play around with these settings a little bit to see how it makes it a little bit easier to read there. You can't really tell. If I do it like this, you can obviously tell that there's some black around it. If I stretch it a little bit more, you see it's a little bit easier to read, but it doesn't stand out that much. So if I compare this to that, it's just a little bit easier to read, but you didn't notice that I switched it. There's been other ones where I use it to knock out something in the background. So you can either use what I did with Mel here, right? Or you can use the same technique. Follow your heart. Let's try this. Outer glow, switch it to black. Let me just switch it to black here. I go normal and then make it a little bigger. It's another way to do it. And just play with these two settings until you get something that, this does not look as natural. Space it a little bit more. So it makes a little bit more sense. You could play with it. So if we wanted to make it stand out, we can go with something like that. Or we can go with something like this, right? Something like this. So that's with this layer. So different ways to do it just so that we can have a little more options on pictures. So those are some of the techniques I use. Hopefully it helps. The first is the stretching of the picture that I showed you with this one above. The second was using an effect like this on the side. And the third was using the text behind the picture glow, making it black. And you could do the opposite for white if it's a light background. I hope that helps. And let's keep making some awesome Instagram pictures. Thanks, Monzur.